Welcome to the debate. Today, we are diving into a really monumental Week 13 NFL result that dramatically altered the AFC landscape. That Thanksgiving clash where the Dallas Cowboys, suddenly heating up at 6-5-1, edged out the heavily favored Kansas City Chiefs 31-28.
I mean, this was the kind of loss that it leaves scar tissue, you know? It wasn't just a tick in the loss column. It completely torpedoed Kansas City's season trajectory. Their AFC West title chances cratered, and their overall playoff odds, they just fell into this precarious territory, landing at, 27.1%? For a team with their pedigree, it's astonishing.
It is. It absolutely is. And that steep decline, it really forces us to confront a critical piece of analysis. Was the Chiefs' critical loss primarily the result of internal failures and, frankly, deeply self-inflicted strategic errors, mistakes that, could be corrected? Or was this a genuine, fundamental defeat mandated by the Cowboys' superior in-game tactical execution and the payoff from their midseason talent moves? I maintain this loss was almost entirely dictated by the Chiefs' own systemic failures. They beat themselves.
And see, that's where we differ. I come at it from another angle. While sure, Kansas City certainly gave Dallas opportunities, I think that 31-28 victory was earned, not gifted. I'd argue the result stemmed directly from the Cowboys' ability to identify and really exploit specific personnel and tactical advantages that effectively neutralized the Chiefs' otherwise elite talent. Dallas was just the superior team on the field that day.
Okay, I see why you might focus on what Dallas did right, but let me give you a different perspective, one that's rooted in the foundational data of what the Chiefs are capable of. When we analyze Kansas City using these proprietary advanced metrics, let's call them PFSN metrics for now, they still profile as an elite team. They rank 4th in offense impact with an 85.3 grade and 8th in defense impact with a 79.6 grade. So this isn't a fundamentally broken or untalented roster. This is a high-performance machine that was just catastrophically derailed by poor internal execution.
Right, but capability means nothing if you consistently fail to translate it into momentum and points when it really matters, especially in a game with these kinds of playoff implications.
And that's my point exactly. The core issue wasn't a lack of talent or some flawed scheme. It was a devastating lack of discipline and control. Just look at the penalty sheet. Kansas City was flagged 10 times for a staggering 119 yards. That is a gargantuan number in a 3-point game. Think about what 119 yards of penalties does. It turns manageable 2nd and 5s into, 2nd and 20s. We saw crucial holding calls wiping out explosive gains and huge PI calls sustaining Dallas drives that should have been dead. It just completely destroyed any momentum they tried to build.
And the Cowboys were certainly happy to accept as gifts, but I'm not convinced that self-sabotage was the defining factor here, not when we account for how Dallas managed the game flow. You can't just ignore the mid-game chokehold Dallas put on that Chiefs offense.
But that chokehold began with the Chiefs' own failures. Look at the critical mid-game lull, as I call it. After 2 early scoring drives, the offense it froze completely. They sputtered on 4 straight possessions across the 2nd and 3rd quarters. They crossed midfield on every single one of those drives, marching into potential scoring territory, yet failed to put a single point on the board. This offensive drought, fueled by fundamental execution flaws, including critical drops, is what allowed the Cowboys to take control and build a decisive lead. The Chiefs were systematically failing themselves.
That's a compelling argument based on systemic flaws, I'll give you that. But it treats the Cowboys' defense as this sort of passive beneficiary. I view them as an active architect of those flaws. Have you considered how Dallas specifically capitalized on immediate, non-replicable advantages and key personnel shifts to force that mid-game stutter? This wasn't just Kansas City beating itself. Dallas was strategically forcing the issue through talent deployment.
So tell me how that deployment was decisive enough to overcome 119 yards of penalty chaos.
Well, it starts in the trenches, specifically on the defensive side. The Cowboys' aggressive mid-season trades for defensive linemen, guys like Quinnen Williams and Jadavion Clowney, paid immediate, tangible dividends that altered the geometry of the game. Williams, for instance, generated a team-high 6 QB pressures and was double-teamed 10 times on pass rush snaps. That presence alone completely altered Kansas City's protection scheme. Clowney contributed 2 of the team's 3 sacks on Patrick Mahomes. So this D-line wasn't just opportunistic, it completely disrupted Kansas City's rhythm, holding them to just 5 of 13 on 3rd downs and forcing exactly those 4 straight punts that you mentioned. That is a strategic chokehold.
Those are certainly impressive individual stats for newly acquired players. I grant you that Williams and Clowney made plays.
And the synergy just continued on the other side of the ball. The Cowboys maximized their advantage against a struggling Chiefs O-line that allowed Mahomes to get sacked 3 times. In stark contrast, the Cowboys' offensive line kept Dak Prescott completely clean. 0 sacks allowed, despite the fact that the Chiefs blitzed him on nearly half of his dropbacks, 48.7%. Prescott became a maestro identifying those blitzes, completing 10 of 12 under pressure for 108 yards. That isn't luck, that's clear tactical superiority.
So that brings us right to the heart of it, the impact of O-line health versus institutional discipline. You're arguing the Cowboys won the trench battle due to tactical adjustments and, well, bad luck for the Chiefs, specifically the injury to Pro Bowl guard Trey Smith.
Exactly. Trey Smith being ruled out with that ankle injury was a major exploitable advantage for the Cowboys' D-line. It forced the Chiefs to use Mike Caliendo, who, coming into the game, had a pretty poor 47.6 pass protection grade from PFF. That substitution created a direct tactical weak point that guys like Williams and Clowney were brought in specifically to destroy. That decisive technical victory winning at the line of scrimmage against a backup was instrumental.
I acknowledge that the injury and the resulting mismatch was a tactical opportunity for Dallas, one they executed well. However, I'm just not convinced that a single injury, however important, overrides the pattern of systemic failure. The Cowboys' 0 sacks allowed doesn't negate the Chiefs' devastating 119 penalty yards. That number is it's too high to attribute solely to one injured lineman or one specific matchup. The Chiefs inflicted more damage on themselves through these flag-laden drives and critical drops than the Cowboys' D-line did through pressure alone. The self-inflicted wounds amplified the tactical impact of that mismatch tenfold.
But the quality of execution under duress tells the true story of who was prepared to win that game. The team that executes cleanly under pressure is the superior unit.
Okay, let's discuss that QB duel, because this is where the execution debate really sharpens. So point 2. QB performance under duress versus reliability. Patrick Mahomes' final line, 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, it suggests brilliance. He stacked incredible, improvised plays late, trying to pull off one of his signature comebacks. Yet his team repeatedly undermined him with drops and those critical penalties. His individual ability was constantly being sabotaged by mental miscues, which spelled doom. Mahomes himself even admitted, we got to win every game now, showing an awareness that it's the team's lack of discipline, not just opponent superiority, costing them.
I agree, Mahomes performed heroically, but Prescott's clinical composure and clutch play under extreme pressure, that was the objective differentiating factor that handed the Cowboys the win. He wasn't relying on magic. He was relying on precise, consistent, repeatable execution that neutralized the Chiefs' greatest defensive weapon, the blitz.
And how can you quantify that precision?
Well, we can use analytics like CPOE, completion percentage over expected. Prescott's performance under the blitz was measured at a monumental plus 24.7% completion percentage over expected. He wasn't just surviving the blitz, he was carving it up. That level of efficiency is a clinical victory for the Dallas scheme and for Prescott's decision-making, not just a failure by the Chiefs' D to cover.
But those clutch plays often occur in a vacuum that's been created by earlier Chiefs errors. It's hard to separate the two. When a team repeatedly commits fundamental errors, drops, flags, missed assignments, the focus has to shift inward. Mahomes' spectacular effort was an attempt to cover up these huge structural weaknesses.
And Prescott's surgical precision was the final blow. I mean, look at the end of the game. Prescott delivers a crucial 13-yard completion to George Pickens on 3rd and 2 with the game on the line. That play iced it. It denied Mahomes the opportunity to even touch the ball again. That's not a systemic failure by the Chiefs. That is a specific, decisive, superior execution by the opposing QB in the most critical moment.
That decisive moment only happens because the Chiefs' offense failed to sustain drives earlier, forcing the defense to be out there longer and under more strain, which thereby increases the probability of error in the clutch.
Which brings us to point 3, analytics versus situational performance. This is crucial for defining causality. The Chiefs' defense is analytically elite. They rank 8th in impact and 4th best in points allowed, just 18.3 points per game. How could a unit this highly rated surrender 31 points and 457 total yards to the Cowboys?
That really is the ultimate enigma of their season.
I'd argue this disparity proves that the analytics failed to account for the powerful situational pressure applied by a truly resurgent Dallas team. This Cowboys club wasn't just resting on talent. They were riding significant momentum, winning 3 straight games, including an emotionally draining, historic comeback just 4 days prior against the Eagles. They were galvanized. The analytics failed to measure that psychological lift and the sharpness that comes with it. That's an external, tactical advantage.
I understand the appeal of the momentum argument, but I rebut that by saying the Chiefs' defensive stats were inflated by the catastrophic failure of their own offense during that mid-game lull. If the offense goes cold, commits a series of penalties, and delivers short drives, the defense is inevitably put in terrible field position and forced to be on the field longer, often leading to fatigue.
Who gave up 31 points and 457 total yards.
Against an elite opponent like Dallas, increased exposure inevitably leads to points. The failure was absolutely collective, but its true origin was the systemic offensive errors and lack of discipline that continuously hung the defense out to dry. It wasn't a true decline in defensive capability, it was a byproduct of exhaustion and impossible field position. If the offense executes and sustains drives, that top 10 defense holds the line. The pressure started internally, like a slow-motion train wreck.
But the defense itself faltered in those key moments, regardless of field position. They failed to generate pressure or stops against a red-hot Prescott in that clean pocket. You cannot dismiss Dallas's ability to seize that moment, forcing 4 straight stops, as merely a byproduct of Kansas City's offensive flaws. Dallas's defense stepped up exactly when the game was decided, allowing their offense to score 13 unanswered points and take the lead. They didn't just benefit from KC's mistakes, they maximized them.
I still firmly maintain that while the Cowboys played inspired ball and deserve credit, the Chiefs ultimately handed them the win through poor discipline and execution. The 10 penalties, the critical drops, the mid-game scoring drought, these self-inflicted, unforced errors are why their decade-long playoff streak is now resting on, quote, life support. The underlying analytical strength for the Chiefs remains high, which suggests that Kansas City is still a championship caliber team, provided they eliminate these systemic mental lapses. They control their own fate.
And I conclude that the Cowboys proved they could leverage targeted defensive advantages. The trades for Williams and Clowney paying off immediately, along with superior O-line protection that kept Prescott clean. Dallas's ability to execute so cleanly under pressure demonstrates that momentum and tactical superiority in key matchups can in fact override high-level analytical metrics. They were the better, more prepared team on the field that day. Full stop.
Ultimately, regardless of whether the primary cause was internal, correctable errors, or external, opponent-mandated pressure, the Chiefs have accumulated 5 road losses this season, their most in the Patrick Mahomes era. And that pattern of inconsistency, especially away from home, is a severe issue that has to be addressed, regardless of where the blame for this specific game is assigned.
It leaves the listener with plenty to consider as the Chiefs navigate the rest of their schedule, hoping that their analytical promise can overcome their current execution struggles. A good discussion.